Um, I'm very happy to be in Philadelphia for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, one of them is to renew my friendship with the Writers' House. Jamie Lee mentioned that Richard and I came in 2006, and what we discovered here was something that's very unusual, which it was a house that had become a home that nourished people certainly in their writerly aspirations and also nourished them with just fabulous food. And I know I've been told now for several months the food tonight is going to be grand. There's a link between that visit in 2006 that Jamie Lee happily didn't mention already, which was, it was in February of 2006, and so it was maybe 5 months after Katrina. And Richard, my husband, had written an op-ed piece in the New York Times the Sunday after Katrina, and Al, in interviewing him, asked him to read it. And as I recall, Richard could get most of the way through it, and then he couldn't. It meant so much to us. Well, in a way, that op-ed piece was kind of an elegy for a city. I'm a planner. Those of you who are planners know that our fundamental characteristic is that we're optimists, and I tried to be optimistic about New Orleans, and I meant it. So tonight, what I'm going to do is to try to share with you some of the things I learned in my optimism of trying to rebuild New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I'm going to be reading and talking about this book. I'm also delighted to be at Penn because it's a truly grand school for urban planners, and some of the best planners in America, although the first one I'm thinking of was a Scot, were at Penn. That's Ian McHarg. Who founded Wallace Robertson Todd, is who you all affirm you undoubtedly know. Wallace Robertson Todd worked in New Orleans for 25 years, up to the time that they were invited down by the mayor to lead the Bring New Orleans Back Commission to come up with a plan for rebuilding New Orleans, which the mayor didn't much care for and sent them all home. But anyway, I'm glad to come back to where so many of the great thinking about urban planning started. And then finally, I'm glad to be in Philadelphia because it's a city where people liked my book. So nobody could resist coming. Okay, when Jamie Lee proposed this evening, she said I should read for 20 or so minutes and then talk about the book for 20 minutes and answer questions. I'm going to change that format just slightly, partly because my book is really a logical argument for what you will come to know as a good city plan. So what I'm going to do is read a few things from the beginning of the book, which sort of set the stage, reminds us of where we were back in 2005, and talks about what I learned about what I call the trouble with city planning, and as you might imagine, have tried to figure out a way to solve. I'm also going to talk about the state of the city of New Orleans now. For a year after Mayor Landrieu was elected, I served as the chief of staff to the deputy mayor in charge of infrastructure, public facilities, and community development. In other words, everything that had to be built. And so I have had a front row seat on what's happened in New Orleans up to the current time. And finally, on the theory that there are many things that might interest you and that I might not mention or I might just gloss over in my remarks, I'm going to give you plenty of time to ask me questions at the end. You can ask me about anything. There was a time when what people wanted to hear about was how New Orleans got into this mess. Knowing that John was going to be here tonight, I decided I wouldn't make you suffer through that again. But if anybody's interested in it, then I will talk about it. The last thing I'll say, and it just repeats something Jamie Lee said, is that this book is not the book of a Mandarin who knows better than everybody else in her profession what ought to be done. This is a book in which anything that I criticize, and I criticize quite a few things, is something that I have done. I make fun of my own prose. I make fun of the questions that I've asked citizens. I've learned something, I think, which comes out of this terrible tragedy. I'll start by reading a few passages, and I will refer you while I'm talking. This is a map that shows the flood depths of New Orleans on August 30th, or August 31st, 2005. It's 2 days after the storm. And the greener it is, the deeper was the water. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to it. On August, this is the day before that photograph. On August 30th, the first day after the storm, the news spread across the world. Many reporters from newspapers, television, and radio suddenly wanted to know even more about New Orleans and what they could see on television. One journalist asked me, "All of you knew this could happen. Do you look back now and think you should have done something different?" I'd been watching the same coverage she was watching, the forlorn people awaiting help at the convention center, the stranded rooftop survivors, the waders through what had been streets. I saw the dead. And even though I didn't recognize the individuals, I knew the people. I answered, yes, much should have been done differently. It was the only creditable answer. City officials entrusted with the care of New Orleans citizens should have prepared for their safety. No one should have stayed and ridden out the storm. Citizens should have had jobs that paid enough for cars and for escape. Hospital generators shouldn't have been placed on the ground floors. City documents shouldn't have been stored in basements. Pumps should have worked. Officialdom should have ensured the strength of levees. FEMA should have come sooner. The Bill of Particulars could as well have included not ever founding a city here. But it was established here in 1721, as close to the mouth of the Mississippi River as possible, and it is now one of America's largest ports. Commodities, wheat, grain, and beans harvested in states stretching from Montana to Ohio were and are barged to New Orleans for the simple, important reason that other conveyance is too costly. A port on the river and near the Gulf of Mexico is necessary, and any such site would be vulnerable to hurricanes. But sensing the reporter's profounder question and addressing it as a planner for whom hindsight can be galling, I went on. Yes, we could have used New Orleans land better. We could have not built the lower Ninth Ward on reclaimed swampland. We could have clustered families on higher ground. We could have refused to allow subdivisions on the city's outskirts and instead guided developers to the ample vacant land downtown. We could have used our highest ground, historically invulnerable to flooding, for something better than surface parking lots. And there was more. Because planning is by nature reactive to what already exists and to what is proposed as change, planners are almost always forced to wait for a new political regime, for a fatter economy to make feasible renovating a derelict bus terminal, or tearing down a dilapidated strip mall. Although I didn't perceive it while talking to the reporters so soon after the hurricane, I began to think in the following days that the city awash in flood and its own bad decisions might actually be experiencing a rare opportunity. For on one terrible night and day, a new recourse for correcting old mistakes had become thinkable. In the face of this destruction, rebuilding and reuniting the city's absent population were now unarguably necessary. By this disastrous stroke, planners were given opportunity to do the jobs they were trained to do, to devise how to use the city's lands more to the city's betterment. I've kept an image from the early days of October 2005. It's a photograph that accompanied a news story written about a month after the storm. Only it is an image not of New Orleans, but of Oklahoma. A picture taken from inside the entryway to a simple house, looking onto a front porch where several people are seated on folding metal chairs. A little girl in pigtails leans against a man. They all stare forlornly out at the pretty autumn landscape toward a small drying barn with a red corrugated aluminum roof. Beyond are thick woods where only a few leaves have started to turn color. These Oklahomans were displaced New Orleanians, some from the lower Ninth Ward, survivors who'd been sent north after their failed attempt to ride out the storm. Their houses were destroyed, and now these citizens had little to do but wait and hope that government would imagine a plan to bring them home.